This week, the hot topic is critical hits and critical failure. I've heard multiple people talking about it, so I figured I'd throw down my 2 cents. But before we get into my overall opinion about critical hits and critical failures, let's talk about where these things come from. Well, where does critical hits come from? Well, it doesn't originally come from a gaming book. This idea was used way before you find it written down in a gaming book. It comes from the instincts of players. They roll a 20 on the 20-sided dice, and if the higher number is meant for success, like they're doing an attack, well, right away they think, wow, I rolled a 20. That is something special. Oh, what is the outcome for that, Game Master? Nothing. You just hit. Oh, and if your number wasn't high enough, I guess we could say you missed. You need it more than that. That instinctive reaction even reaches over to the 1 with new players. They roll a 1. They look at the Game Master worried that rolling a 1 is worse than, say, rolling a 2 or failing in some other way. It's instinct to assume these things will happen, especially if you're new and you don't know the ropes. You'll have an instinct that the 20 will mean something critical and the 1 will mean something critical. So there should be no surprise, right, that this got developed into the gaming books, that the concept of critical hits and critical failures exist, because most players think they should. They're instinctively reacting as if that's already in the game. Well, then why not apply it? Debating this topic, if critical hits and failures should exist or they shouldn't, some of it makes no sense to me. I'll hear people on the side that are against critical hits and critical failures tell you why it's unrealistic. But you can go to critical hits and critical failures and play realism into it all day long. Is there a chance when you can barely hit somebody that you just accidentally hit them? Like a wild swing is going to touch them. No matter how good they are, no matter how bad you are. Well, yes, in the real world that can happen. The unexpected knockout punch where a guy has his ass handed to him in a fight, but somehow one, clipping punch knocks out the other guy. It happens. We would call that a critical hit in that circumstance where the person fighting can't hit the other person, so they get a lucky punch. Critical hit. Or what about critical failure? You're there punching somebody out, but the next thing you know, even though they're weak and they're not really handling you, you swing wildly, you trip up, and your head goes into a wall, and you're out cold. Have you not seen UFC fights? I've seen UFC fights where a guy goes to drag another guy down, take him down to the mat, but he hits his own head so hard off the mat, it knocks him out, right? Not his opponent he's doing the move to. That would be a critical failure. So you could find arguments on either side to say this is realistic or not realistic, so you're wasting your time there. Look, maybe gameplay bothers you seeing so many critical hits happen. Maybe you think people should miss on the 20 or not fall on their face on the 1. Well, you can go ahead and apply that to your game. There's nothing wrong, but the problem is you can't really degrade the other take on the game where people do want to apply critical hits or critical failure. And when we bring something into this game, well, why would we bring critical hits in and not critical failure? There's some people out there that will say, I hate critical failure. Well, you don't get the bonus without the negative, right? If your wild swing could luckily hit this enemy that normally you can't hit, well, then that swing on the 1 will make you fall on your face every so often. And that's old school, tabletop role-playing games. You bring something in, you bring something that's just not a bonus, but something to balance it. We've seen WotC drop that whole concept from D&D of bringing something in that's positive and bring in a balancer to balance that out. They stopped doing that. That was something TSR did really well. And I think any tabletop role-playing game should. Finding a perfect ground or a good ground where you want the game to be on, you got to be very careful. There's nothing wrong with bringing new things in, and you'll find this out if you're someone who homebrews. Like you take parts of a game, or you take apart a game, and you make an alternative version of it, what you'll learn is most things you bring in, you got to bring a balancing act in with it. If not, it does blow the game up. We see the game blown up with WotC 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition. It's not something so easily done with the old school versions of the game. But I would say to anyone, critical hits and critical failure, they're a part of, at least D&D. And for the most part, they should be a part of other games. There should be a version of, there's the special roll and there's the extreme failed roll. Players assume this instinctively already, right? To a degree, they want it, and they don't like it when it works against them. And that will be up to you how that works, right? In every case where I have had a discussion or a debate or an argument with someone who is against critical hits or critical failure, no matter what the argument was, when you dig down past the argument, it has to do with a bad experience. Maybe the person's character was killed on a 20 against an orc. Or maybe the person's character looked like a fool dropping his sword, or falling on his face, or falling in the mud, what have you, because he rolled a 1. And the person that I'm arguing with simply does not want to experience the negative outcome of critical hits and critical failures against their character. So they want to get rid of it for that reason. If that was the case for everything in the game, we'd have nothing left. There's always going to be a negative outcome when there's a benefit to the character, right? To the player. And that's how this works. Note, the person isn't saying get rid of critical hits and failure before the bad experience. Everyone that I've met that is opposed to critical hits or critical failure always seem to get there after a bad experience with it. And I would say to people that if you reason it out outside of the game, you're not going to understand even why it exists. You're going to try. Some people will get in the zone of really being okay with arguing it away because they forget why it's there. It's instinctive for players to assume something like that is happening even if critical hits and critical failures are not written into the book, right? The rule comes from the people. It's not just made up in a certain way. It's based on experience with players assuming something will happen, and sooner or later we put that into the game. Even if we take it away now, what's going to happen? Players, even if you don't mention the new players coming into the system that this is a thing, they'll instinctively assume, hey, does something special happen on the 20 or happen on the 1? Right? And you'll get back right into the circle where you're just putting it back into the game anyway because players assume it's there. Like it's an assumption. That's why we play to it. And at the end of the day, the negatives balance out the positives. And yeah, fighting can be chaotic. It can be crazy. So we accept the outcome that this causes. This just brings more chaos to something that is meant to be chaotic, right? How you bring order to that chaos is not to get rid of the chaos. It's to get comfortable with the chaos and get used to it and accept the outcome of the chaos, be it good or bad, right? So I would say we should keep critical failures and critical success in the game, period. It's a wild part of the game. Leave it be. Don't get rid of it because of a bad experience. And realistically, don't try to reason about it too much outside of the game. Bring some new players into the game, watch them roll that 1 or 20, and look at you to see what happens. And then you'll understand why we have critical hits and critical failures. And guess what? Yeah, the greatest trained warrior in the world can fall on their face during a fight, can drop their weapon, can fall in the mud. They can also get a crazy swing, and they could be a trained warrior fighting a guy who's in sandals, and that sandals guy could get a lucky shot, an unexpected shot, and hit a soldier that he doesn't have the training to hit, shouldn't be able to hit, but this crazy situation has led to a hit. Hence, critical success, a critical hit. So these things do apply in reality if you try to compare them to real life. Critical failure and critical hits in combat are a realistic, real-world thing. Just saying. Anyway, for now, take care. You know what you can do? you can hit the like button. You can share the video. Oh, and there's another button you can press. That one that lets you subscribe to my channel for more content. Oh yeah, there's that bell thing. You can press that so you know when I've uploaded a new video right away.